So Steve Pinker doesn't know history, at least political history. That's my main beef with all of these intellectual dark web people. And usually their total lack of historical awareness leads them to, if they're Sam Harris, to support essentialist, ridiculous views of Islam, which, again, I always have to reiterate, does not mean that you cannot criticize Islam or object to Islamic forms of government. It means that literally to talk about it as one monolithic, uninterrupted thing is historically, sociologically, politically, economically illiterate. Now, Steve Pinker, somebody handed him a copy of the Niskanen paper that came out this week. And the Niskanen paper is like a some type of think tank or nonprofit that put out
Libertarian.
Libertarian. And it's a new effort to get beyond the false choices of right and left, and yet another and unending version of the essentially be socially liberal and fiscally conservative, right? Give people some tax credits, but also deregulate. The internet's so cool, this type of thing. And it echoes the dominant politics in the 1990s, which was the third way. And Clinton and Blair and Schroeder ruled the day. And, it's basically like if somebody somehow got billions of dollars in hedge money to relaunch AOL dial-up service. And then they were like, this is the newest and most exciting form of internet access in the world today, AOL dial-up. And it isn't just that it's old. I mean, obviously some things that are old can be applied to today, but it's that particular model did not work. It led to the collapse of social safety nets, broadening income inequality. It deregulated banks, including Wall Street and Citi and London, which helped lead to the global economic meltdown. It compromised center-left parties across the globe, leading to their underperformance in the wake of the financial crisis created by Wall Street. And where it's being primarily practiced today, 20 years after its heyday, is in France, where Emmanuel Macron is sitting at about a 20% approval rating with massive street demonstrations going on because of his moves to implement austerity and redistribute money to wealthy people. And this is, of course, exactly the time in Steve Pinker's history-free embrace of whatever will confirm his instincts for hierarchical market liberalism found. And that is meritocracy, the third way, and all of these great goodies that, of course, are totally new ideas if you don't have a grounding in political history. And Steve Pinker quote tweets this piece from, I believe, is this a Ross Douthat
Ross
album?
Douthat.
Ross Douthat.
Fresh off his We Need to Bring the Wasps Back. And I'm saying that as a Catholic who actually descends from wasps but converted to Catholicism.
Yeah. Fresh off of his The Wasps Governed America Better piece, has a new column in New York Times, which is entitled How Meritocracy and Populism Reinforce Each Other's Faults. And I didn't read the piece. I don't care to. The only pieces I'm interested about reading Ross Douthat are like his, basically if somebody's making fun of his old sort of sex literature. But Steve Pinker is to the rescue with the fallacy that meritocracy is a consciously chosen system. Reality. It's what you get when you move away from cronyism, nepotism, racism, sexism, old boy networks, and other biases. Now, Steven Pinker teaches at Harvard University, which still to this day, I think it's upwards of 30% of the admitted class in the most prestigious university on the planet, arguably, running a close second to Bates College, that those people have weighted admissions based off of their parents also attending Harvard or other family members. Like literally an old boy or old girl network at his institution. You could broaden it out and say that generations of wealth and being trained to take tests with outside tutors and resources, the time to study, the context to study, the social capital, the emotional investment to think that you should be in the most elite institutions are all massive inbuilt advantages that shape your outcome in life and how you perform in this quote unquote meritocracy. Do we have that Jeet here tweet? So, but this is basically, this is it. This is the problem with the Steve Pinker perspective in a nutshell, essentially. It's technological Panglossianism. And it doesn't describe, it both has no description of the reality of the world we live in, where the likelihood of how well you do in life is far more determined by the wealth of your parents than anything else. And as Jeet here says, Pinker teaches at a university where 30% of students are legacy admissions, where Jared Kushner got admitted because his family made a huge donation. Of course, he thinks he lives in a meritocracy. Indeed, Jared Kushner, in a book expose on the Ivy League admissions process, was a case study where they actually got someone, I think from his high school, saying like, yeah, I have no idea how it had to have been the donation because there's no other way that this guy could have gotten into Harvard. So, but what's great is that, okay, this has no description and connection to the world we live in today, where wealth is preeminent, where your outcomes in life have more to do with the income of the family you were born into than anything else. And secondly, if we were to live in a world that was governed on different metrics of meritocracy, and there should be a lot of different metrics of meritocracy, by the way, because I'm not only just interested in rewarding people that might be clever in school. I'm also interested in people's ethics. I'm also interested in what people actually want to do and contribute. In order to live, though, in a world closely approximating this fantasy, you would have to do one of the greatest radical wealth redistribution projects in the history of human civilization. In order to have meritocracy, you would need to have radical democratic socialism, or it is literally a fantasy.
Exactly. Like, look at Pinker's original quote: "The fallacy that meritocracy is consciously closed reality when it." I can't. Sorry.
The fallacy that meritocracy is consciously chosen system reality. It's what you get when you move away from cronyism, nepotism, racism, sexism, old boy networks, and other biases. And it's like,
what about inheritance?
What about inheritance? And what about, by the way, all those other things that we haven't moved from? Like, we would have to do a whole political project that you spend all of your waking hours opposing to get to that world where it could be a reality. And that's the problem when your only politics is just looking at current events and then reaching for naturalized, quote unquote, science explanations for them. And you skip how all of this stuff actually gets made in the realm of politics, economics, finance, and how it's historically formed. That is literally where all the action is. So, Steve Pinker's, he's goofy. Watch his interview with Mehdi Hassan.